What about at Kansas State University? What's the climate there, Professor Aistrup?
Well, I think it's much the same as it is in Oregon. We have a fairly active left movements, but we also have some very strong right movements, and they tend to show up in the newspapers in terms of battling out over who was correct in terms of the decision to go to Iraq. But by and large, I think that I would agree that really back in the 90s we saw students be a little bit more active than they are today. It's kind of interesting that while the war in Iraq is certainly a significant issue, it's not the type of galvanizing issue that the Vietnam War was. Mm-hmm. And I think that's largely because this is a volunteer army versus a draft-based army. And so that means that on most students' life that it used to have. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean it's not a significant issue. It's just not one where they're really mobilized to protest or to voice their opinion in a strong and forceful way.
Mm-hmm. What about, and we've been lucky that we haven't had any attacks in the United States since September 11th. Certainly it's been a mess in other parts of the world. But this idea that the Republicans are good on security issues and the Democrats on socialist issues, if, heaven forbid, we should have another problem here, that we would see a complete turnaround, that we would see Americans saying that they are more conservative because they go to the Republicans for protection.
I guess my feeling about that is I think that was decisive in the last presidential election in ways that were kind of only indirectly reflected in exit polls. But I'm not sure that Republicans would get the same attraction out of that a second time, in part because the war has gone so terribly in Iraq that it seems that Americans have been made to feel more insecure about U.S. policy in relationship to all things in the Middle East. So I think that it has. I mean, I could be probably will be wrong about this, as political scientists often are. But it doesn't seem that there's not the same kind of split of kind of a George Lakoff. Daddy party on security and mommy party on social issues that there's been in the past.
Do you agree, Professor Aistrup?
Well, I think probably the situation is that the Republicans have been really pushing this issue so much that there's been no attack because they've been in charge, basically, and security is so good that if there was an attack, during the latter parts of the days of the Bush administration, that might do more to indict the Bush administration than help them. And that might hurt the Republicans even more because they have been saying that the only reason why we haven't had an attack is because of their security measures. And so I think it may, you add on top of everything else and, the failures in Iraq or, this then suggests that there's a failure at home in terms of the strategy as well. And so I don't know that would necessarily help the Bush administration.
Let's go to phone calls for our guests, and we'll do it in a moment. Our number is 800-486-8655. 800-486-8655. If you're joining us in Milwaukee, it's 414-227-2050. Why is it that the ratio of Democratic voters who describe themselves as liberal Democrats has been going up? The share of Democrats who say they are conservative has dropped 23%. And also, we're seeing that the Democratic Party has by 34% to 31% Republican in party affiliation, which is the largest Democratic advantage since the Clinton administration. If you feel comfortable in identifying yourself, you can do so and say why you consider yourself a conservative or a liberal, and why, though, the broader question, there seems to be a liberal, is it moment or is it trend going on? We'll take your phone calls in a moment. We have two guests with us, Professor Joseph Lowndes, who joins us from Oregon, where he is assistant professor in political science at the University of Oregon, and Professor Joseph Aistrup, who is the head of the Department of Political Science at Kansas State University and also an associate professor there. I'm Kathleen Dunn. This is the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. Coming up the second hour of our program today, we'll be speaking with the co-author of The Race Beat, The Press, the Civil Rights Struggle, and the Awakening of a Nation. Hank Klibanoff will be with us. He is a native of Alabama and is the managing editor for news at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He has reported for a number of other papers, and this book is an extraordinary account of the press and how it took the press to really awaken the whole country's attention to the issue of civil rights in this country. It is just a very, very well done book. We gloss over that, and so many people died, and there was so much ugliness and hatred, and it's quite an account. So that's coming up, hour number 2. Our phone number, 800-486-8655. Is there a liberal trend, or is it a little liberal moment? We go to Doug from Wauwatosa, our first caller. Hi, Doug.
Morning. I hope you had a great President's Day yesterday.
It was kind of quiet, but thanks. I read about the president, so.
Were you? Oh, I thought you would be home, like, polishing your Abraham Lincoln shrine, perhaps.
Darn it, I don't have one of those. Maybe I should.
That surprises me, actually. At any rate, I definitely consider myself way left of center, and I've been encouraged by some of the trends that have occurred lately. I was a ward leader for Move On during the Kerry campaign, and it was not difficult to get volunteers, especially high school kids from Tosa East, for example. Very dedicated, very intelligent students, and I was encouraged by that. Our ward went Democrat for the first time in quite a long time. And I also think that there are many people who were liberal before this, but it depended on how you'd phrase the question. For example, if you'd ask them if they wanted socialized medicine, people would say, well, not necessarily, but universal health care, they would be in favor of that. In terms of environmental policies, if you said conservation instead of environmental issues, even if it was the same exact issue you were trying to ask them about, they would vote in favor of it, some would say. And I just think that the internet has also been a galvanizing force. I mean, I see the success of Democracy Now! and other venues on the web, and that's where most of the anti-war sentiment is coming from. And it seems as if the Ned Lamont victory before Lieberman went independent was also a positive step. So, even before the Iraq War began, there were massive protests in the United States. I think that's unprecedented in terms of major conflict. Also here in Wauwatosa, we passed a non-binding referendum to bring our troops home.
Yes.
It's been, I feel it's been very positive, and I'm encouraged by it. And I do see some anecdotal evidence relating to that. Professor
Aistrup, you want to respond?
I think he's right. That is, there is the foundation there, and there are the groups and the issues by which to galvanize around. What I don't see yet in terms of the left is kind of what I would say is an overarching framework that kind of unites the disparate groups together, whether you're an anti-war protester or whatever, or somebody who's associated with global warming and interest in that type of idea. What I would say is that his point, though, about the framing of the issues is an extremely important one, and people like James Carville, for example, have spent a lot of time on how the left should frame their issues so that it has the broadest appeal, because his point is exactly right. When you talk to people about universal health care, that's something that has broad appeal. But if you say, call it socialized medicine, that does not. And so it's one of those things where the left has been working at very hard in terms of trying to frame the issues in a way that spins those issues in a way that's positive towards them. And I think that the more they can do that, and plus then provide an overarching kind of liberal framework that most people can grab hold of, a hook, if you will, that most people can grab hold of, this movement, which right now really in its infancy, will build upon kind of the failures of the right and go forward and maybe be the liberal reawakening that some people have talked about.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Doug, for your call.